And we are live here. It is a party of two tonight in the spoiler room. We may be joined by a few more, but as of right now, my riding shotgun with me in the spoiler room tonight is Mr. Scott Davis. How are you, sir?
I'm doing good. Did that create an echo in here? Because
No, it did create an echo. It sounded like we had more people in the room. So tonight, I wanted to do a second spoiler room. It's 4th of July Eve, so I probably picked the wrong night to do this. Uh, but we are going to be talking about dark 80s kids movies, and as I said, we may be joined by one or two more. I posted the link for this hangout in a number of places, so we'll see who pops in and who pops out and such. So tonight we did one a while ago of dark 80s movies, kids movies, and that was The Dark Crystal, and that was what else do we have in there? Oh, Labyrinth, and what was the last one?
Never-ending story.
Never-ending story. Thank you very much. And so I had so much fun with that. I wanted to do it again. And so that's why we're doing this today. And we are joined, oh, look at this, right in the line, Mr. Brad himself, the man who, how dare he has a life, has joined us tonight. I appreciate you joining us, Brad.
Absolutely. Sorry it took so long. My schedule today got completely thrown off by Menards. I will name them.
Do we gotta go boycott and make signs?
No. Anessa and I, we're building the studio here in the house, and to do that, we're building tables so that we can mount the equipment and so on and so forth on it. And so I like sketched out the plan for the table structure and got that all worked out last night. And we went to Menards, we purchased everything, and then one cool thing about Menards is you can rent one of their pickup trucks.
Sure.
So for a fee, you get it for an hour, and if you don't have a way to carry your lumber home, you can borrow this again for a fee, and you can take it home. So the truck was not available last night. So we had to go after work, and the truck is only available from 5 o'clock till 8 o'clock in the evening.
Oh, sure.
Wow.
So
not a large window of time for stuff. So.
Not really. So we weren't able to use it last night. So we went after work today, and we went to get the wood, and they did not have the sizes they said they had in their inventory available. So we had to have millwork cut stuff down, and there was negotiation and blah, blah, blah. And basically...
Yeah, go ahead.
An hour and a half worth of time is just shot in the rear, and we had to push like the first podcast that I did today back like an hour and almost an hour and a half, which and everything else completely out of whack, and which is why I'm now joining you at this late moment in time.
Oh, that's okay.
Do they still do those commercials? You know, it's a giant time-wasting inconvenience from Menards.
I just like to say I want to let's go to Menards and shave big monkeys, as opposed to save big money.
Save big money, shave big monkeys.
Shave big monkeys at Menards.
It's okay. I've got my fruity frosty drink here, so we're all good.
Nice.
And we're going to talk Dark 80s Movies Part 2. Brad has been gone for a while because, again, he's had a life. But he has been a very kind man and posting us on a number of websites that he's in charge of for Midwest Communications. We appreciate that. But that's who it's for, correct, Brad? Was it Midwest or?
Yeah, it's Midwest Communications.
Midwest Communications. So you can find some of our podcasts there, some edited ones with the naughty words cut out. And,
you're the one who does that.
Yeah. And we're also on iTunes now. So, and I had so much fun last time. We were just starting off here with the spoiler room. We've got Brad now in. We've got Scott, and we're gonna do more dark '80s kids films because I just found some more that I wanted to talk about. And this time around, though, we're not talking about puppet movies. We're talking more animated films and live action. And so the first one that I wanted to talk about tonight, well, first off, I don't know if you guys been to Subway. Have any of you been to Subway lately?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, I have
Did
one
you
on the corner,
see-
so I work it.
Did you see the sign that's in there? Apparently they're promoting, and this goes with our episode last time of So Bad It's Good movies. Jared is going to be in Sharknado 2.
And you know he's gonna get eaten. You know he's gonna get eaten. That's gonna be the joke.
That's a great reaction, Brad. I love it.
Yeah, I have actually.
I turned around. I literally turned around after I got my sub, and yeah, and there it was. Old Jared is going to be in Sharknado 2. So that's our link from our last episode to this one for So Bad It's Good Films is the fact that I saw that today, and so I just wanted to bring that up just to get that right.
Jared, he's getting Sharknadoed.
I wonder if the sharks eat him if he's 500 calories or less. So.
And there it
So-
is.
And there it
I'm
is.
not full at all.
So
Or maybe the sharks mentioned, like, you know, all these people, it's the same ingredients. They all taste the same.
Yeah. What do they mean by fresh? This guy isn't fresh. You know, they can do a lot of things with it. But one of the three more movies that I found that I considered dark 80s-ish movies. One of them was in '79, but then it was re-released in '80, so we're good there. But these were family films, but they were really darker films, but they were wide release and marketed towards kids. And the first one I want to talk about is the movie called The Last Unicorn. Now, the directors were Jules Bass and Arthur Rankin, and if anyone who grew up pretty much in the 80s and 90s are familiar with those names, because they were pretty much involved with just about anything that you watched as a kid. I mean, they produced a lot of things, including Thundercats. So they were involved in both the 2012-2011 Thundercats as consultants, and then they were also producers of the original 80s TV series. But they did all of those. They did Tiger Sharks, Silverhawks. They did the Lord of the Rings animated films. They helped produce those as well.
Yeah,
So
like the Hobbit, Hobbit and Return of the King there.
yep, they did The Hobbit and Return of the King. So, you know, Jack Frost, all of those. So these guys were big name guys for family films, and so then they did this film called The Last Unicorn. And on the surface, it sounded like it was, you know, decent. You know, a brave unicorn and a magician fight an evil king who is obsessed with capturing the world's unicorns. Great. That sounds, you know, that doesn't sound too bad until you watch the cartoon. Now, this cartoon, what you find out in the plot, and again, this is the spoiler room, what you find out in the plot is that the unicorns were actually driven into the sea by a gigantic, scary-ass red bull that's led by this king who lives in this decrepit castle by himself with one other guy, and the unicorn is looking for her unicorn friends who are all in the ocean that are there for his amusement. And there are a number of other dark themes going on in here. She hooks up with a troupe of magicians and a witch who happen to capture an actual harpy, which I don't know if you guys noticed, but I don't think that harpy would have made it past the censors nowadays. Do you guys remember the harpy in the cage in Last Unicorn?
No.
I watched these movies all again, so
She
'cause
had
I hadn't seen the movie in like 25 years, so.
She had 3 breasts, and they were very prominent and out there.
All I can say is that Total Recall, you owe Last Unicorn money.
Now, initial thoughts. Do you remember seeing this as a kid at all? We'll start with Brad. Do you remember seeing Last Unicorn at all as a kid?
Barely. I
Barely.
I barely remember it, and I wonder if my parents had seen it and saw the three-breasted thing and went, no, or what was going on there. But I know that some of the friends in my group often talk about being a schmendrick.
Yes.
So yeah, Schmendrick not a really likable character, I guess, on all levels.
That's a Yiddish. Well, it's a Yiddish saying. I can't remember what it means. It's not good. It
No.
doesn't mean schmuck, but it's around those same things.
Yeah,
You know?
and that character was the inept Schmendrick. For those who haven't seen it, was voiced by Alan Arkin, and he's the inept magician that accompanies the unicorn on her quest to find her friends. And it's funny because listening to it, it's a young Alan Arkin, and you can still kind of hear the voice in there. But yeah, his name isn't really meant to be a nice name.
It's Yiddish for stupid person or Hebrew for a fat person.
There you go. That's your main. It's your supporting character next to the unicorn. It's someone who's called a stupid person in Yiddish. So that right there kind of tells you this movie was really. I mean, it was geared towards kids because you had the unicorn in there. But if you look at some of the themes and things going on in here, I really don't think they would get past nowadays. What do you think, Scott? I mean,
well, it's so hard to tell, because there's so much from this era where you look at it now and you say, how could that have possibly gotten through? And then there's other things where you look at it and say that we've moved in the other opposite direction. But these days you got to remember that this film and also upcoming Secret of NIMH were G. Lots of films were G. Lots of live action films were G back then. It wasn't until like the PG-13 rating had been around for a couple years and they knew what to do with it. It's like mid-80s that it started to shift towards this thing that now you have to be, like practically like a Barney film in order to get a G anymore. And so they're like, they curse in Last Unicorn.
Mm-hmm.
There's scariness.
He says damn and hell in here, and there's all kinds of language in here.
Yeah, I mean, so it's hard to say, but Last Unicorn was something it never really registered with me when I was a kid for some reason because I was into everything as a kid, but Last Unicorn was like, oh, Last Unicorn, maybe I'll see it, so which is weird when you're like 7 years old because 7 you have 2 levels. You have completely disinterested or
Yeah.
and this one I was like, maybe, I don't know. I think I caught it like when it came out on cable. I'm like, oh, okay, it's
it's not a bad animated film. It's based off of a book by Peter S. Beagle, I believe the name is, who was very protective of his work, actually. He initially wasn't going to have, I read up that he wasn't going to have Bass and Rankin produce it at first, but then he listened to their ideas, and he's like, okay, yeah, we can do it. But for me, especially watching it again, man, is it a bleak and dark cartoon. It really
is.
I mean, here you have the unicorn, who's pretty much the symbol of innocence and purity, and being chased by a Red Bull, which you could use that as a metaphor nowadays for a number of things as well.
Red Bull being an energy drink.
Red Bull still ruining innocence 20, 30 years later. But with this one, I mean, they cover the theme with, first off, you got the unicorn, who pretty much is, in the beginning, an arrogant, prissy, like, I'm the best sort of thing, because she is a unicorn. And, she can unlock things with her horn, and she frees the harpy, which is interesting, because I don't know if you guys remember the scene, but she frees the harpy, and the harpy goes after the unicorn at first, and she's just all like with her horn, like, yeah, whatever. And then the harpy goes after the witch who's the head of the zoo that put the spell on everybody, who actually was voiced by Angela Lansbury, if I remember correctly. Her name was Mother Fortuna, or Mommy Fortuna. And the harpy actually munches on Mommy Fortuna.
Yeah.
And it's not just implied. I mean, you see the body there, and the harpy is in between. And I don't know, do you think they had maybe some extreme visuals in here that scarred us as children?
I think that kind of stuff's good for children early. I think that if you protect them too much, that you're gonna have. If I feel bad for the kid who grows up and says, "No, I can't think of any cartoons or anything I used to watch that kind of frightened me," because either that says, okay, this is a sociopath in training, and nothing affects them at all, or it means that nothing was able to give them that emotional resonance and stuff. So I think all this stuff is good. I think that's why Jim Henson and Spielberg and, in this case, Rankin Bass put all that stuff in there. One of the things I loved about this sequence was that it was foretold. I mean, because she told him that, she says, "Your death awaits in that cage." You're like, I'm like, yeah, that's a really interesting thing. And she had this whole thing where she says, "Yep, one day I know that harpy's gonna kill me."
Well, then one day comes a little sooner than she expected.
But even when she does it, she's gonna know that I was the one who captured her, and that's my legacy. I'm like, well, yeesh, that's kind of a interesting route for this thing to take. I thought it was one of the grown-up themes that I actually liked about this film.
Well, go ahead, Brett.
The one thing that during that time period, you had sort of contemporaries like Rankin Bass, Don Bluth, and not Kracfalusi, but Bakshi. A lot of their stuff, I mean, in that time period when they were kind of at the height of the point where studios were giving them money to produce things and to make things happen like that, there were a lot of it were morality plays, and you can't really do a morality play or something that kind of shows either good and evil or making good choices in your life without showing something kind of negative. So you look at, I mean, Wizards is probably not a good example of something for kids.
No.
But I don't think any of Bakshi's stuff from that era is. But yeah.
But Bakshi was a contemporary of Bluth and some of the Disney work. They spun off from. I think they both spun off from Disney. I might be wrong there. But Rankin
did for sure.
Bluth did for sure.
Might have.
Yeah,
Bluth did actually. We'll actually get to Bluth with Secret of NIMH.
Bakshi might have.
Yeah.
I'm a little fuzzy, but I love Bakshi.
Bakshi, I'm not, but I think he was influenced by or tried out for Disney. Maybe I'm not sure.
Yeah, I know that he worked with Bluth. I really think that he did, but I could be wrong.
Bakshi did do my favorite animated film of the 80s, though, American Pop. So.
Oh, okay.
I had to get that plug in there. Sorry.
Yep. And he did the Lord of the Rings film, didn't he?
Yeah. Yep. He did. Yeah. He did the rotoscoping Lord of the Rings, the Hobbit,
Fire and Ice.
Or not Hobbit, but he did Lord of the Rings because that scared the piss out of me with Gollum.
Oh Lord. And Wizards is still one of my favorite Bakshi properties. For sure.
I've got that and Fire and Ice on Blu-ray and everything. I love it.
So it was an era at the time where there was mature animated stuff being produced along with family-friendly stuff during that time. So, and it was a little hard to see the lines blurred. I mean, because with Last Unicorn, as the movie plays out, there's a spell that's done on the unicorn that turns her into a woman. And suddenly we get into this whole other storyline of her not wanting to be a unicorn anymore, and I thought that was pretty. interesting to take with a story that's about the last unicorn, and she turns into a human and doesn't want to be a unicorn again, or forgets how to be a unicorn. I thought that was kind of a mature type of theme, but like you said, Brad, they're meant to be morality plays, and you can't do some morality plays without maybe getting a little dark. Now, what about the soundtrack? I want to talk a little bit about the soundtrack because it's a fantasy. I mean, this is really a true fantasy fairy tale, and they went with the band America to do the soundtrack. Brad, you remember the music from Last Unicorn?
Very, very little. But you look at the weird thing about the 80s, and this all kind of ties in, is you had very interesting selections for bands to do soundtracks, like Queen. You look at the Highlander. God, they did
Flash
something
Gordon.
else to Flash Gordon. And then you had like Tangerine Dream ended up doing Blade Runner and
Legend.
Yeah, so it was just like you had these interesting choices being done for music. So having America do the music for that really doesn't surprise me, or doesn't really seem out of character for that time period of films being done.
It was very, very folk music-ish, wouldn't you say there, Scott?
I would say so. Well, I mean, here's the thing is that and America's not one of these bands, but I'm really into like progressive rock music and stuff like that. So naturally, like when they had the Alan Parsons Project type music, like say like in Lady Hawk and stuff, I was like, yes, but in America was more of a folk / AOR band, and there's just some stuff where you look back on it and say, nah, that's pretty good. That sucks, but that's pretty good. And honestly, the American music I loved in this music. I mean, I was just getting ready here. I'm like, going, I'm alive. And I'm going through here, like those were great songs. I actually liked America's contributions to this movie quite a bit. I liked it a lot more than when they just decided 1 hour into the running time of Last Unicorn, saying like, "Oh wait, this is a family film. We have to make it a musical," and they have these horrible sequences of Mia Farrow and Jeff Bridges singing completely off key. I was just like, oh, just this terrible, terrible stuff. I'm like, get America back in here to do this, please.
Mia Farrow.
I did read that. Incidentally, that I thought one thing was so funny. I think I read this on IMDb, like everything else, that the album went #1 in Germany
In 1983, yeah.
And I said, okay, yeah, because the band America is huge in Germany.
right next to David Hasselhoff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so the music did actually kind of fit, except like when you said when Mia Farrow was singing. Though I thought Mia Farrow did fine as the voice of the Last Unicorn, or the actress. It kind of fit the character that they drew. But yeah, definitely the singing, and Jeff Bridges. It was funny watching the credits and seeing how many names are actually doing voice acting in this film. It's crazy. You've got Christopher Lee in here, Jeff Bridges, Mia Farrow, Alan Arkin. You had, at the time he was big, Robert Klein was in here. You know, you got Angela Lansbury, Renee Auberjonois. Yes, the guy from Deep Space Nine. He was the voice of the Talking Skull.
Benson, represent. Sorry.
Yeah, Benson.
That's where I know him from, man.
And from Benson too. Sure, they had some big name stars in this film. Now, what also is interesting when I was reading up on it from IMDb is that the animation actually wasn't done by a U.S. company. It was done by a Japanese company, which I thought the artwork in this would look pretty good, especially for the time. I don't know, Brad, what'd you think of the visuals and the animation? I mean, for the time.
It was Rankin Bass Productions had a look to it if it was animated. If it was the stop motion stuff, it had a definite studio look to it. So it was more of the pronounced noses, a certain look around the eyes, the structure of the shape of the eye, as it were, and the cheekbones. All of it were very uniform. That was the studio style that you got.
Right.
So for that time period, especially with the success of The Hobbit, God, I'm trying to think what other animated stuff they did besides this.
This was their big standout one. I mean, outside of the Hobbit was really their standout one, and you can see it. I think their style in the old people. How old people are drawn.
Yep.
It's like basically they're wrinkles that move.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to describe as a style, but when you see it, you go, oh, yep.
You're watching a Rankin Bass film. Yeah, you know the style.
So Return of the King. I'm trying to Wind in the Willows.
Wind in the Willows.
I barely remember that one. Trying to think what else that you'd see it and you'd go, oh yeah.
Well, they were involved in so much stuff. Well, even when you watch the original Thundercats in the 80's.
The Frosty the Snowman.
Or Frosty the Snowman. There you go. Mm-hmm.
There's another one that, the nose of I remember the little girl character, the nose has that certain look to it that definitely is Rankin Bass style.
Their animation looked quite a bit, especially their earlier stuff, looked quite a bit just like their stop motion. I mean, it really had that unique style to it. So,
it also had a lesser frame rate. I'd noticed, than a rotoscoping thing, or then Secret of Nim that we're talking about, so that it seemed. I mean, the people seemed very detailed, especially it showed very realistic looking people, although they were kind of caricatures. They seemed, but they had a slower frame rate, so that it seemed kind of rougher. But that was their aesthetic. I'm not saying that they were sloppy. I'm saying it was their aesthetic.
Yep.
And it's one of the things that they went through, I think.
So there's a lot of really great things with. I remember Last Unicorn. I remember the big red bull scaring the hell out of me. And I remember being sad because of the unicorns in the ocean. That's what I took away when I was a kid from Last Unicorn, was that it was a very sad movie. And watching it again, even though it does try to end on a happier note, it's still kind of a melancholy film. And
that's what I liked about it. I liked the melancholy thing. When they would try to pander kind of more to the kid audience, as I think when the film kind of fell apart. But when it got to just telling the story, about regret and hubris and
who you really
destiny and who you really are, exactly, very good. And and of course then you have all the themes that are touched upon with Christopher Lee's great character. And those were the parts that really stuck with me. Was those melancholy and mature themes. I felt it's when they said, "Oh, we better lighten this up a bit." That they, you know what? Commit, guys. Just commit to it, because I know it's kind of a scary realm to play in, especially when you got a multi-million-dollar production. But you're doing fine. You don't need to do that.
So I remember standing out for me as one of those other dark films, and that's why I kind of wanted to bring it up. And the animation in that, that really kind of set up a number of other films. Actually, another film, the next one that I'd like to talk about, unless anyone had any final thoughts with Last Unicorn, is one that came pretty much that same year, which was Secret of Nim. And now Secret of Nim, really, I literally just finished rewatching it today, and man, watching this film, I was like, for a Don Bluth film, this one I think is probably, next to maybe Earth Was it Titan AE?
Tiny,
Yeah,
which I really liked a lot, by the
I
way.
love Titan AE. I think next to Titan AE, this is probably one of his darkest films to really do.
Oh,
You
oh
know,
yeah.
I mean, and this was his first one. I was reading up on it. Now, Secret of Nim, for those of you who don't know or haven't watched it, it's basically about a field mouse named Mrs. Brisby who has a very sick little baby mouse, and she looks at the aid of a number of people to try to help him get better, all the while with the threat of their house possibly being destroyed by the plow because it's moving day, but she can't move her young son because he has pneumonia. So she looks to a number of sources, including the evil rats, who have their own plan, and they're a tribe or colony, whatever you want to call them, of very smart rats, and they give you a reason behind it, and so there's a lot of mythology behind it, and this movie is dark. Don Bluth, it was the first one he produced after he and a couple of animators spun off of Disney because Disney hadn't committed to doing full-length features for a while. And so Bluth and his company said, we want to do features. And Disney's like, 80, we've done features, we're doing shorts now. And so they came out with Secret of Nim. Now,
Also, they just said it was so dark that they just like,
yeah, Disney's like,
too dark for them.
But what I want, initial reactions when you saw Secret of Nim when you were younger. Brad, you remember seeing Secret of Nim?
Yeah, it was. I remember seeing the movie, and it was I think it was one of the first times reading a book and seeing the movie and seeing some of the differences. And the book kind of creeped me out. Because you got these super intelligent rats, and they're super intelligent because they were experimented on.
The classic 80s animal experimentation theme that carried on for quite some time.
Yeah, and they escape and create their own society. It's like, wow, okay. And, the place is a mental institute, so it's like now you've got this whole fear of doctors and, oh my god, if something goes wrong with my brain, they're going to experiment on me, whole vibe going on, and you got this in a film, and then you've got that frickin' cat. Holy crap.
Which they name aptly Dragon.
Dragon! That's a cute and cuddly name. I want the dragon sitting on my lap and purring at me. No. That whole thing was just really creepy, and you felt so bad for the little mouse he's all sick, and now they have to do all this stuff to try to keep him safe and have everybody not get killed. It's just there's a lot of tension, dramatic tension going on throughout the whole film or book versions of it, and oh man, what a truly kind of edge of your seat sort of a deal in reading it or seeing the movie. It gets to you. It really does, especially as a kid.
What about you, Scott? Your initial reactions? Do you remember when you first saw it as a kid?
I was astonished by that movie, and I think I'm listening to you guys talk, and I'm listening to us go over this, and I'm thinking, I think that because these things combined what are kind of childish things, you had the funny things with the Dom DeLuise and everything, and combining them with these mature themes, I think a lot of these things are what kind of shaped me into this person I am today, for better or worse, and, because, it's iffy, but I loved it right away. This is one of those, now, unlike Last Unicorn, this is one of those movies where I saw the ad, I said, Mom, we're going, and Mom was, my dad's never been like a movie person. I saw some movies with him, like Aristocats and all that stuff, but my mom was the one who always took us to the movies and stuff, so I was like, Mom, we're going. She's like, oh, Secret of Nim looks great, and she's watching this, and I remember her sitting there in the theater. I was I think if this came out in the summer, I think, of '82, then I was like 6.
Sure.
And I remember her saying, "Oh God, turn your head, Scott." I'm like, "Nope." And it's just like, this is like, yeesh. But she loved it. I loved it. I just thought it was fantastic. And I mentioned earlier how American Pop was my favorite animated film of the
Right.
'80s. Well, Secret of Nim is my second.
Right.
And honestly, Bluth's other film, American Tail, is my third. Because I think that Don Bluth, he upped the ante. I think he made more mature movies. I think he made more technically efficient films. I think he was trying to go into explore other areas. I said, well, we can still make these for family audiences, but we can also explore mature themes because childhood is scary.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well,
Brad
I mean,
brought up
Mims.
some. I'm
Oh, go
sorry.
ahead.
I just wanted to say Brad brought up some such wonderful things there about like the doctors and everything like that. And I was thinking, oh my God, this probably really affected me because I was in hospitals a lot as a kid.
Sure.
I was and I to this day I have a fear of hospitals because I kept getting like wheeled into surgery and they kept like taking my damn eyes out. So like, let me have my eyes back. But but childhood's scary. It's scary. I mean, a fluffy little kitty looks like a dragon to you if
Yeah.
you're small and innocent and helpless enough. And I think that they translated this so well that he really upped the ante, and he kind of kicked Disney in the keister, and I think that's why in the mid '80s, early '90s, Disney. It took them until then. They said, "Ooh, we got to get our mojo back," and they did.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. I mean, what stuck with me with this film was just how dark it was when I was a kid. I remember the owl, the great owl. For those, there's a point in the movie where Mrs. Brisby, who's voiced by Elizabeth Hartman, who this was her last film actually.
Yeah,
She passed away soon afterwards, but she was a classic. She was in a number of films, but Mrs. Brisby goes sees the Great Owl to voice them, and the Great Owl is actually voiced by John Carradine, and that scene stuck with me forever. When you say Secret of Nim, I immediately it's one of those two scenes that stuck with me, and that was it was the Great Owl because it was really I mean, she goes into this cave. She's a mouse. You're waiting for her to be eaten. She's followed by probably what was one of the most scariest animated spiders to have been on the screen. I mean, the thing was just grotesque. And what does this great owl does? This Bigfoot comes down, squishes the spider, and eats it in front of her. And then he proceeds to eat a moth. It's like, and then he gives her some words of wisdom and flies off, but he's just this huge thing on the screen. And I remember seeing that, and with the voice from John Carradine and the way it was drawn by Don Bluth, just resonated with me for like ever. When you mentioned Secret of Nim, the owl immediately came to mind to me because that was pretty scary damn owl. Wouldn't you say? I mean, that scene with the owl was really like dark and creepy.
It had those glowing eyes too. We didn't really see that in animation a lot up to that point. This I don't know what you call it. Maybe you guys know. I don't know, but it's like that luminescence. They were able to create this like weird luminescence with the lightning effects, so that these eyes just glowed in a way that animation wasn't supposed to glow up to that point. And I'm like, it was just this eerie yellow thing with this wrinkled beak and curves.
Well, his eyes didn't have his eyes didn't have any pupils, and he wasn't the only character like that. You had Nicodemus, who is the creepiest, cool, good guy ever.
Maybe that's how John Bluth draws cataracts. I don't know.
I don't know. But you had Nicodemus in there as well, who was another great character who had the cloudy, kind of glowy eyes. I think that was his way of portraying kind of the magical beings maybe of this world that he portrayed.
It almost seemed like windows to wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that no restraint, but you could look into there and see all this knowledge, or there was nothing in the way of it being seen or being given to you. So yeah, very creepy.
I was gonna say because you hadn't seen many characters drawn like that before. Then I mean, when I was a kid, I hadn't seen any characters drawn with no pupils in their eyes and glowing eyes, and they were thin and spindly. The Nicodemus character was with the creepy hands, and I mean, this freaking movie opens with you learning that Mrs. Brisby's husband dies. I mean, it starts with their dad dying. You're like, holy crap! Okay, we're already starting off with this dead, and she's you're facing that whole widow, and she's trying to raise the 3 kids on her own type of theme going on.
Then you find out that she has to do the one thing that killed her husband,
yes.
which is to put the cat to sleep.
Yes.
Now she has to do it.
For the night. We have to clarify that for our children.
Not poison and or kill said cat, but just to put it to make it sleep so that they can basically
do their stuff.
Move what they need to move the house essentially, and do the other things to keep the child safe.
Right, because they need to move. They need to move her house from the plow because they live in the field during the winter until springtime comes, and then they've got to move, and they got to move her house, and that's why she goes to the rats, who you find out her husband actually was a hero of the rats because her husband was a smart mouse who was also experimented on. With the rats who were experimented on, and so you've got these brilliant rats living in this rose bush, and they owe their lives pretty much to her husband who died. So most of them are pretty sympathetic to her, but we do get a bad guy in here because you need a bad guy because it's not good enough that we have creepy good guys. We've also got to have a bad guy named Jenner, who was voiced by Paul Shinar, and his character was interesting in that out of the rats, I thought it was interesting because Nicodemus is kind of portrayed as this kind of old, wrinkly, creepy guy, but Jenner, did you get that kind of suave feeling from his character, the way they portrayed him, where he's the villain, but he kind of had that slick look to him. Was that just me?
He was very suave. He was very slick. He was a politician. Because when you first see him, he's not like trying to kill somebody. When you first see him, he's trying to win his way by being this suave orator and and actually kind of get through with politics. He's doing power plays and stuff. But he looked more like a beast in the movie too.
Yeah.
He had those sharp teeth, and I love he has this great line when they do come up with a plot for murder later on. He says, "No taste for blood, eh? They've taken the animal out of you." I'm like, oh, freaking hell, that's so good.
Yeah,
scary as hell.
He makes that comment about taking the animal out of you, referring to their experimentation. I mean, there's a lot of levels going on with these characters in this film that are impressive for a family movie, really. I mean, it's not just your cut and dry, she's on a quest and she meets all these people. No, I mean, there's all levels to all these different characters, and they address so many different issues, from the loss of father to, like you said, politicians, because the rats have a plan because the rats are smart. And I love this angle. I totally forgot about it when I was a kid, how most of the rats didn't want to steal the electricity from the farmer. The rats were smart enough to hook up electricity in the rose bush, and
which
they're smart rats from the NIM labs. But they didn't. I love the morality there of how they didn't want to be thieves. They felt bad about the fact they were stealing electricity, and they had an idea to get their own. And I'm like, I totally forgot that angle when I first watched it, and I was like, wow, that's actually really cool. Not only are these intelligent rats, but they've got morals, which they're rats and they have morals. I mean, was that an interesting spin, do you think, Brad? An interesting take that they didn't want to steal, they didn't want to be rats, even though they were.
Yeah, I think that speaks to, or at least the feeling I got is it speaks to our thoughts of what rats are. They're thieving rodents. I mean, their job is to survive, but they survive off the scraps and things that are forgotten and left behind, or they just will take it right from you. So it's a whole kind of I think a reversal of that whole, when you say rat to somebody or call them a rat, it's an insult. It's you're speaking of their character in a very negative fashion because they've wronged you somehow, probably. And to see that thought being given, that thoughtfulness to doing the right thing, definitely was a great reversal, I think. Absolutely.
Yeah, I thought so too. What about you, Scott? How the rats are portrayed, the good guy rats, anyway.
Yeah, well, that's a thing in itself, isn't it? Because, I mean, how many of these animated films did we see where if the good guys were cats, the bad guys were dogs? If the good guys were dogs, the bad guys were cats. If the good guys were mice, the bad guys were rats, We had, in this movie, and he did it again in American Tail because he had, a good guy cat in that movie, even though all the other cats were like, but you got all these, they've said, no, it's more complicated than that, You have rats who are good, rats who are bad. You have mice who are cowardly, mice who are strong, smart, stupid. There was such a, in a little 83-minute animated film, he created these worlds where there was not this black and white distinction.
Mm-hmm.
That you could make choices for yourself, and you couldn't tell who the bad guys were just because of what they were or what they looked like. And I mean, because I don't even think we'd honestly look at the magical creatures. I think we'd say like, Jesus, they're scary, But they were also helpful, and
right.
then.
Well, I mean, you get that thrown right away. I think the moment in this film where you get that where, okay, the rat's not necessarily bad is she shows up in the rose bush, and here you have the first guy you see in the rat hideout is the old inventor that she was talking to earlier, whose buddy you find out with the rats, and then you find out her husband helped the rats, and you're like, wait a minute, these are rats, I mean, even the rat in Charlotte's Web, who wasn't he named Nicodemus? He was a thief. I mean, he was a slimy guy. Even though he kind of did good, he was still mostly portrayed as a slimy guy. And here we have rats with diversity. You have diversity in A Secret of NIMH, which you don't normally get, at least back then, in your animated films. You had kind of a black and white type of thing. You had a, dark and light. You had, like you said, one good, one bad. You didn't really have a diverse group of characters, and this film really has a rich, diverse group of characters and an interesting dynamic. I had some notes in here on some of the people who did the voicing for it. Not only did I mention the guy who voiced Jenner, who, by the way, was born in Milwaukee. He was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, the guy who voiced Jenner. But for those of you who are interested in the kids' voices, Shannon Doherty was the voice of the young sister mouse, Teresa Brisby, and Will Wheaton was the voice of Martin Brisby, one of the brother mice. children, and I thought that was interesting when I saw that in the credits, because I'm just like, wait, that can't be the same Will Wheaton, but it was. I mean, they had stars in this film. Dom DeLuise as I guess it was the bird or the crow, who was the comic relief. Like you said, Scott, it was like
one of the best performances Dom DeLuise ever gave, honestly. Apart from his stuff with Mel Brooks, I'm serious, like, because he did a lot of voice work in these family films before and after, and but his character of Jeremy the Crow was so good. I mean, his comic timing was great, and he had a real character and he had a real heart. You're like, oh man, he's great. Also, don't forget, we mentioned this before we started the show, before we went all live and stuff. Space Hunter is a rat. I love it. Space Hunter, Peter Strauss.
Peter Strauss, who played the good guy, Justin, in Secret of NIMH, went on right after this to be in Space Hunter Adventures in the Forbidden Zone, the 3D post-apocalyptic, whatever you want to call it, film. It's a great film, but it's really bizarre. But I mean, you had some well-known actors in this as well doing voices. Brad, were there any voice characters or anything that stood out for you that you really liked? I mean,
you mean for
just in Secret of NIMH, just a character that stood out for you, like Scott had one, and I had, for me, was the owl with John Carradine. Was there a character for you that kind of stood out?
I think in that story, I really, Mrs. Brisby really just, to me, that was the main focus of the thing. It was her journey, her trying to take care of her kids, her eventually having to put the cat to sleep to do the thing that killed her husband, to find that courage to do that. It was all about her for me. When I think of this, I think of her, and that's like the main focus in my head. Although, in looking back at this and seeing that Derek Jacobi, Sir Derek Jacobi, God, he's been in so many different things. The thing that really stands out for me that he did was Brother Cadfael.
Right.
And that basically the Dark Ages mystery series, and also playing the Master at a certain point in Doctor Who. God, he's such an amazing actor, and anything that he lends his voice to is gonna be awesome.
Well, and it's his voice is the first one you hear is Nicodemus, and that voice is just so unique. Yeah, it's like kind of sends a little chills down your spine when you first hear it.
Yeah, absolutely.
The Mrs. Brisby character that Brad touched on, what's so impressive about it, and I think I got a lot more appreciation of this watching this now, was that, it's supposed to be a helpless mouse. She's scared, she's afraid, but she discovers the strength in herself, and she is so strong. I mean, even before there, she stops the plow herself by crawling into the machine. I mean, it's like, and when you see her next, she's like, huddling and shaking like a scared mouse would be, but she just cut the fuel line of the plow by herself, and then she discovers the courage to go into this scary territory for her family. I mean, that is an amazing. It's sad when you can say that one of the best female characters of the 80s was probably this mouse, but it is.
It is, actually. She's a strong female character, but she's not overly unrealistically strong. I mean, it's believable, the courage that she musters up. You can see where she gets the courage from, but it's not like she's just I'm brave, I'm just going to walk right in. I mean, she's hesitant about going into the owl's cave. She's hesitant just for a moment about, doing another action that could bring her bodily harm, but she does it. And she's an amazing female character to be written, not just for an animated film, but for a film in general at that time. And not only that, but we don't do the whole. I mean, there's a little moment where when she meets Justin, but they don't do the whole. Oh, she needs a romantic interest, or she needs. She needs a man to save her. They don't do that really. There's really not that feeling at any point outside of when Jenner's going after her. But even then, it's not quite the helplessness. Justin's just helping her, but
yeah,
she is a strong character that still has that vulnerability, but you can see steps up to the plate immediately when she has to without really thinking. I mean, she volunteered to go. I mean, that's the big thing too. She not only found herself putting the sleep poison in the food, she volunteered to do that. She could have walked away, and she didn't. She chose to do that because she realized the scope of it. And I think she's a very intelligent female, written female character for any movie of that period, not just of the animated films, but really interesting female character, and especially near the end, where she's getting her hands wrapped because she burned her hands. We don't have Justin sitting there with her going, well, you could come with me to the Thorny Valley or whatever. No,
the Thorny Valley. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. Thorny Valley.
Wow. That went there quick.
You're welcome.
I do run the Perverted Parodies Facebook group. Remember?
No, it's okay. The minute I said it, I knew it was coming because I had the same.
Oh, I just said thorny.
I said thorny. But I mean, they could have had that, like you've had in other animated films, or where she's like, "Oh, thank you for help." They don't have that scene at all. I mean, she's the one that actually rescued her family in the end, really, with her strength.
It was all her.
And
it was really all her.
It was all her. Like Brad said, the movie really is all her, yet they don't really take all of the natural tropes that you have seen in other films like this at that time, or I shouldn't say natural, but common tropes that you saw with female characters at that time, and that you even still see today. Mrs. Brisby really is an interesting female character in general, the way she was portrayed and written and acted, and it was just fantastic. And I really think that helped make the movie a lot more memorable, was the fact of her character being that strong character that still had vulnerabilities, but was able to do what she needed to do to get the job done. Yep. And I very human characteristic to a very small mouse. So I think this is really, for me, one of the kids' movies, one of the animated films I saw as a kid that resonated with me to this day more so than many of the other films I had seen as a kid. I mean, this film really stuck with me for so many reasons. Including the fact that we have on-screen deaths, and we're not talking about Disney, oh, he fell over the cliff into the fog. We have guys getting their arms cut. We have some guy getting slashed across the chest, and a dude, the bad guy, he doesn't get aced by our good guy. No, he gets a dagger in the back that you see.
That is the coolest. I remember just thinking that was the coolest damn scene. Is like that is the coolest death I've ever seen on screen. He's gets the dagger in the back because he gets thrown, and the dagger just goes. Sorry, I'm nerding out about that.
you see it go into his back and he falls. You've got guys bleeding in a cartoon, for kids, which when I was young, I didn't remember seeing that often in a cartoon.
No, it was like, parents must have been horrified. They would have been like, geez, first Watership Down, now this?
You're not seeing any movie about animals ever again.
Oh God, Watership Down. There's one that just don't watch that back to back with Old Yeller and have sleeping pills by
Oh,
you because
can't.
oh, I remember
I,
Watership Down. That was another dark film back then. That
oh,
was.
I still won't watch Plague Dogs. Sorry, if you ever do a show on Plague Dogs, you're on your own.
But Brad, do you remember? Is that one of your early instances of remembering like an on-screen actual death in an animated cartoon that wasn't like a Disney-fied death of a villain? You know, because I mean, you had the death of the villains with Disney movies where if something fell and that was it, or you saw him fall off the cliff, but
Yeah.
it faded away. But here, I mean, we have someone getting stabbed and cut.
And it wasn't even a cop-out death either. I mean,
No.
from and I'm not saying like, falling off screen or whatever, but like
Yeah.
he could have died from all the damage he took. No. He gets killed before that happens, just so he knows how wrong he was. It was a level of cartoon justice never before seen, I think, at that level. Yeah, you weren't allowed to feel sorry for him at all. At the end, it wasn't. He's slowly fading, and he might not have been a bit. No. There was none of that. None of that at all.
No, I mean, he dropped the house on Nicodemus. No, we get to see him die. I mean,
Yep.
And well, that whole action sequence I thought was really well directed from when Jenner first goes after Brisby to when he's off. That whole section with the sword fight and, suddenly Jenner's buddy helping out the good guys, just before he gets slashed. And, I mean, that whole thing was directed not... He handled it like a real movie, and he wasn't handling it like a regular animated action film. Like an animated, kids action film. He handled that like a live action film.
Looking at and kind of going back to what I was saying before with those contemporaries, they raised the medium to a different level to say, hey, we've done all these Mickey Mouse things before, we've done all these cute and cuddly things, but here's what we can do if you really honestly look at this as a viable medium for telling a story.
Mm-hmm.
And Bluth did that repeatedly. Bakshi did it repeatedly with the stuff that he did, and granted for a slightly older audience, but I mean, really took it a step ahead of what we had seen before, and really kind of showing, and I would say, and this might sound like grandiose or whatever, but I think that these movies here with these particular directors has helped give us some of the animated films that we see today, and it is taken more seriously as an art form because of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with that.
Definitely, I would definitely agree. I've seen him even compared. They compared a couple of these films to like what Miyazaki does, with his films, and you can see that too. That it's that kind of writing where they're not necessarily like with our last group of 80s kids films, where they're not writing it necessarily kowtowing to the youngest kid they're going for. They're telling a story that is meant for a family, but yet it's not exactly going to coddle and be marshmallow pillows. It's going to be stuff that you sit down as a family and watch. When it's done, it's going to make the kids turn to mommy and daddy and go,
there's a discussion afterwards, guaranteed. And if there's not, something's wrong.
It definitely, they're cartoons that make you, that are, I think, were made intentionally so that those questions would come up. The young kids would watch it, and then, mommy and daddy, what happened to this? Or ask during the movie while you're sitting at home watching it on, at that time, VHS, but, start discussions with your family, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think you need movies like that. That's a good movie that'll get them to start discussion. I'm not saying you need to show. They found the right. I think Don Bluth with Secret of Nim found just the right bar to go at to show what he showed as far as the deaths and the getting cut and everything, without going over it to the point to where someone would really protest. Because you look at it, you go, okay, I didn't really want my kid to see it, but it wasn't that horrible. Your imagination kind of fills things in. Yep. And so that's why I think, excuse me, I think Secret of Nim really is one of those animated films that anybody should watch, especially with younger adult kids. I think you should watch it because there are just so many great things going on with it that it's one of those films that you look at it today and it's still like I watched it today and it was still as impactful and enjoyable as when I watched it as a kid. And it felt like I was that kid again, Yeah.
And I want to say that when I went to school, we had, and this would have been about 6th grade for me, back in my day. But no, this would have been about 6th grade for me, and this was the time where, like I said, it was kind of, I got the comparison of book to film adaptation, because this was read to us in class like towards the end of the year. So it was like I got to read and we discussed the book and then saw the movie. And then the book before that was like Animal Farm. Oh, yeah. I'm surprised I'm not in therapy right now.
Watership Down, Animal Farm, Mrs. Frisbee, and the Rats and Nim. Yeah, there you go.
It was, that was in 6th grade was kind of intense.
You must have been looking at every little woodland creature that came your way and saying, shit's going on down there that we don't know about.
I wanted to hug everything. I'm like, oh God, everything must be horrible for you. Here, have a hug. It was really intense stuff. Really, really intense. And again, Animal Farm, written decades before, but still using animals as kind of a way to sort of safely talk about humans and human condition. And I think that's why it was done in that fashion for the emotional scarring I got for those books being read in class. Really interesting stuff.
They felt the need to animate those.
Yes, exactly.
Like Watership Down when we watched it in class, and every kid in class watched at the very end, and we're just all like, the black bunny died or whatever. Not really taking in the fact that they're talking about politics with these bunnies, right? Yeah. And we're like, the bunny died. We haven't gotten past the bunny died.
But another thing too is, and I think I want to bring up too. There's this saying in the group of friends is Uncle TV, you go see Uncle TV. Uncle TV doesn't judge. Right. It's that you set them in front of a DVD or a TV and you don't talk about it. It's you watch the thing and that's that. This was done at a time where you didn't do that. You something like this, you had to sit down with your child. You had to talk them through it, or there was going to be therapy at the end. Guaranteed. Which is good. It is absolutely good, and it really does need to be done again. And it's sad that we've reached that point where it's like you drop a DVD in your player and walk off, and you don't have that discussion to kind of talk kids through it, because then they're going to make their own judgments, whether that's good or bad or whatever. That's not for me to say, but again, looking at the difference between these films from 30 years ago that we're talking about now to what's being done now, that just really isn't done that much anymore. Or or we really need to get back to that. We really do, because there's a lot of good stuff out there that we talked before about the portrayal of good and evil. That is something that develops a moral compass in a child. That's something that allows you to see consequences for actions without the child actually going through that experience. They can see it through another medium in which they can latch on to, like animation.
Right.
And talking the kids through that is how you help them work through it and understand it without having to go through the experience themselves. And we don't do that anymore, and that's really sad.
Like a parent. Like a parent.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Wow, so, I could not agree with you more on that. That's fantastic.
I was going to say that's well said there, Brad. So I think we're pretty set that Secret of NIMH needs to be put on pretty much everyone's watch list.
It really is. I just want to say that it really is. I mean, if you couldn't tell, it's one of my favorite in the fields of like family fantasy, dark fantasy, whatever. And it's fantastic. The only other thing I would put on, because we talked about the characters, is the environments that they created were so magical and terrifying, because think about it, we don't know how big this farm is, right? But we, just logically you got to think we couldn't be dealing with more than like a couple miles here.
At most,
right?
Not even.
At most, depending on if it's one of those sprawling, Iowa farms we don't know, or whatever, that just seems to it's more corn. We don't know if it's one of those or if it's just like a smaller farm. But the entire thing, it just seems so much larger, because, and not just because the smallest of the creatures, but because they created such a rich, creative, and terrifying environment that everything seems so magical in it.
Right.
It really is.
And that's really
film.
That's Bluth's style too. You look at some of his other stuff; it's all about world building, and immersing you into that as much as possible, which is one of those things that some directors don't. They skimp on it. Bluth did not, and that's one of those things that you come to appreciate with his stuff.
Well, yeah, and you'd get those shots then too. You get the shot like at the very end or like in the middle, where suddenly you get the perspective of where everything is in the yard, and you realize it's actually not that far away. Where they had to move the house to really wasn't that far away.
It's probably like 6 or 12 feet, maybe.
But it seemed like a grand thing, or the distance between the house and the rose bush, or stuff like that. You get he'd show the one panel wide shot where you go, oh, that's where everything is, and wow, that's not really that far away.
No, it's a tiny thing. I was being very liberal in my estimation when I said miles. Just giving them the benefit of the doubt, Yeah.
But to those characters, it really, that was their entire world, and it was miles to them. So I don't think you're really understating it from their perspective at all.
No. It's the world, and that's again that feeds into childhood, right?
Yeah.
What do you know of the world? You don't have any. They give you those maps. They give you those globes when you're in class. You don't have any concept of that,
No.
Yeah.
I lived in a small town in central New Jersey when I was a kid, and as far as I was concerned, New Jersey was a gigantic state. It's a little tiny state. And then then the whole world opens up, and the world just becomes larger and larger and larger the older you get.
Yeah.
And and every time you discovered something that was unknown as a kid, it was magical and honestly a little scary. How many of us ever were like in a mall that we had never been in before, or like a Disneyland or somewhere like that, and all of a sudden, oh God, wait, I lost mom and dad. Where are they gone? Where are they gone? And if you don't have that, if you're out there alone in this wilderness like Mrs. Brisby was, this magical world becomes terrifying.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. What's speaking of that? I used to live in the same city that Mark lives now. When I was a child, and it wasn't until, and I'm 43. I'm going to date myself here a little bit. It wasn't until I think 2 years ago that I was able to find the house that I used to live in. One, because they knocked down the garage that was next to it. But two, because everything that I remembered size-wise as a child was completely off kilter.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Huge.
that sense of scale was gone. You know, it wasn't nearly as big as I thought. And when I actually I stopped and I looked at the house, and I really looked at the house, and I went, "Holy crap, I found it!" and I stopped and I took pictures, and I'm sure that the college kids that lived inside wondered who the creepy old man was. But when I turned around to look at some of the landmarks that I remembered, now they were a lot closer than I remembered them being, which is why I couldn't find the house in the first place. And walking from where the old library was, which is now the Associated Bank, just outside of kind of on the rim of downtown, Mark, you'll know where that is. Yep. That was the old library, and I remember walking from the library to the house, and it seemed to take forever. But now, you know, it would take me like 3 minutes.
Yeah.
So, you know, again, it comes down to, and that's the thing that Bluth perfectly portrayed in that, was the sense of scale. When you're smaller, everything seems so much bigger, so much more magical, and so much more intense, and so much more wondrous. And it was just so well done. And God, I can't say enough about that.
No, I think it's definitely a classic that everybody, like I said, everybody should see, and they can sit down with their kids and watch it, really, and you'll have stuff to talk about afterwards, which is a good thing. So, Scott, any final thoughts on
No, I kind of blew my load on that last one, but I mean, it's just a brilliant film. I just, you know. Yeah. Now I just said something that sounded bad after I said it. That was actually unintentional. For once. For once it was unintentional.
So the final film I wanted to talk tonight, we're going to jump types of films here, is a film that if you watched it, you probably wouldn't believe that Disney's name was on it. And it's called The Black Hole. Or I should say Disney's The Black Hole.
Yes.
A film that surprises me. I rewatched it and surprised me again. That I was like, I forgot just how. I knew it was dark. I didn't realize just how dark this film went.
Yeah, my mom always said, "Oh, that movie was so dark." I'm like, really? You know, as a kid, and then I watched it again. I'm like, oh, yeah.
The Black Hole, for everyone, is a sci-fi picture from Walt Disney. Originally came out in '79, was re-released in '80, I believe you said, correct, Scott?
Yeah, that's how I saw it for the first time, because I was too young to see it in '79. I was only getting, you know, I'd still fall asleep. I fell asleep in this one, too. But it got re-released in some parts of the country along with Sleeping Beauty on a double bill.
Yeah, see, now I saw this in a double bill at the drive-in back in my day.
So did Mark, I think.
Food of the Gods was the opening film.
Oh, jeez.
so Black Hole must have seemed like a big relief at some point.
I was 9 at the time, and I saw this. I remember seeing the huge frickin' mice and rats and all the huge animals. I'm like, "Duh!" And I went in the back of the car and like hid under the covers and tried to sleep. And then my parents were like, "Oh, Black Hole is on," and I'm like, and they lied to me. They lied to me because I saw the end of the film where the mice are huge and they're dead and they're decaying in the rivers, and then the cows are drinking water and And I'm like, oh, I remember looking at that and seeing the kids drink the milk. I'm like, oh my God, it's gonna happen all over again. and then they kicked off the black hole. I'm like, oh, that was terrible. You people suck, and you're my parents. Boo, boo to you.
And then you follow up with Black Hole going, oh, a Disney picture. This'll be okay.
But as a kid, you didn't pick up, I think, all of the really negative undertones. It was so visually stunning, especially for that time. I even had I had a Vincent action figure.
Oh,
sweet! You could pull the head up, and and oh god, it was when you could pull the feet.
I had the Mego Maximilian.
Oh, the Maximilian, yeah.
And
which I still had it. It'd probably be worth a lot.
And I even had a Vincent T-shirt. It was some of the merchandise from the film. That sense of wonder and oh god, I love sci-fi so much, and that movie really was so cool. But then you watch it again later on, and you're like, oh my god, this dude is screwed up horribly.
I know. Well, and for everyone who may not have seen the black hole, it's set in the future, and we have a crew on the USS Palomino who discover a black hole, and they find a lost ship that's hanging on the edge of the black hole, just stationary, called the USS Cygnus, and they end up going on the Cygnus, and they end up finding the captain. Who the guy who's in charge now, I should say, of the ship, who's just this crazy scientist who wants to go into the black hole. He's come up with this force field, and it's because he's super smart, and he wants to go into the black hole, and he thinks his force field, his computations, will get them into the black hole. And you find out he did some really creepy shit to the old the crew of this ship in order to accomplish what he needed to, which was basically turning them into a whole bunch of cybernetic zombies.
Yeah.
And then he's kind of in control, kind of not, into this big red scary robot called Maximilian, which I find funny considering the crazy guy was played by Maximilian Schell.
Yeah.
Yeah, you had so many names to pick from for that robot.
And
we're sticking with Maximilian, damn it.
And so this crew would come to find out this guy's actually crazy, and they don't believe that the story he's giving. And one of the people on the Palomino cruise, her father was on the original ship of the Cygnus, and it really gets dark and heavy real quick. But what I loved is I totally forgot while watching it again, the cast that was in this film. I mean, you had Maximilian Schell, who was a very popular actor, but then you had Anthony Perkins in here playing a straight captain. You got Robert Forster in here, you got Ernest Borgnine in here. I totally forgot they were in this film.
Yeah.
But they had these robots. One of them was Vincent, like Brad said, and he was a snarky SOB.
And voiced by Roddy McDowell, of all people.
And then there was the broken one, Bob, the garbage robot, who was voiced by Pickens.
Pickens.
But they weren't credited in the film. But yet it was Slim Pickens and McDowell doing the voices of these two robots, and they were hilarious. But at the same time, you had the hilarity of these robots, but then you got all these themes going on in this film. I mean, where to begin? First off, you've got the doctor who can do ESP with the robots, which I thought was interesting. Totally forgot.
That's one way of saying it.
but I mean, here they're on a mission to find habitable planets. They come across this crazy doctor who was too smart for everybody, so that's why he got sent on the mission in the first place. I mean, really, Brad, your thoughts with Black Hole? I mean, where do you begin with it? Really, I mean.
Like I was saying before, it was so visually stunning, and that's one of the main things that I've always remembered about that. And yeah, the effects now aren't as great as they were then, but they don't necessarily stand up to today's standards. But the themes of what it was about, again, we're kind of looking at another morality play here of just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Right.
And that's one of the I think one of the big things that this really addresses. This doctor really wanted to prove something, and in order to prove it to the level that he wanted to, he had to start making some serious changes to the crew on the ship, which means either getting rid of them altogether or modifying them slightly. And I always kind of equated it to chasing the white whale,
Mm-hmm.
The black hole was his white whale, and by God, he was going to do it. And to hell with anybody else telling him how much of a frickin' hootloon he was for trying to do it. Because he was having none of it. And Maximilian, the creepiest frickin' robot ever, doesn't say a word, but he's just so intimidating. And that frickin' blade, that spinning blade that that was a horrible way to die. Just horrible.
And one of them does die from that.
Yes.
Anthony
yes.
Perkins is the one that...
Perkins.
You see him go and try to protect against a clipboard? Really? He thought that was a good idea.
Well,
you see it go...
He puts the clipboard up and the blade goes through it. He chops at it, and then you look at the case on the VHS. Yes, I'm dating myself. And you go, "This is Disney."
Yeah.
Yeah. Because there was no gore, but by God, there was no mystery of what Maximilian did.
Oh, because the sound. You'll never forget the sound of that thing going through the clipboard and then into Anthony Perkins' chest. Ugh.
And that face he makes is that... Oh, yep, that's the face of the guy who's getting torn up.
Because he doesn't fall right away either, so he's getting shredded first.
Yeah, he's impaled on that sucker.
That's a classic example right there of where you didn't have to show everything on camera to exactly portray exactly what was going on. And again, you're checking the box going, Walt Disney, the black hole. So far,
again... and this was I mentioned this thing like with the ratings, and how Unicorn and Secret of NIMH were rated G. This was PG, which was a big deal because unlike now where they have Touchstone and all these other things that are PG and it takes like nothing to get rated PG now. This was the very, very first Disney film, live action animated anything that was rated PG, and that was a big deal because this is the days before PG-13 when it honestly did mean it says parental guidance suggested some material might not be suitable for children. So in other words, it meant, your kids can go see this by themselves, but we recommend that you think about it first.
Yeah.
And now it just like they just ignore that. But I mean, this was a time when that meant something.
Well, to put it into perspective, Jaws was PG, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that movie fucked me up for life.
Yeah, and again,
I can't swim in open water because of that film. It doesn't matter if it's fresh water or salt water. I won't do it. Not gonna do it.
And again, you can also say, like, if you want to compare it to 79 science fiction films that came out around the same time, Star Trek: The Motion Picture was G.
Yeah.
Because that had some horrifying things. That had the transporter scene, but like, okay, well if that's G, and this is PG.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
What the hell's going on at Disney, man? Like, well, what was happening was that they were going bankrupt. Their theme parks were supporting them. I've discussed this on other podcasts and stuff that Disney really didn't have hardly anything that was making money as far as
No.
movies this time. They were in the wilderness for like almost 20 years, and this is
Well,
right in the middle. Then this was their big, huge leap into
right.
adult-oriented cinema, and I didn't realize how adult it was until I rewatched it just now.
Yeah, I mean, and well, then you had the conversion. I mean, there's stuff in here that you would have saw on like Logan's Run and stuff like that. Not stuff that you would see, that you would associate with a Disney movie. I mean, they had the conversion table where they're converting people into the zombie, and they're showing it. These people getting the masks on and that, and it's freaking creepy even to adult. I mean, and the fact that it's the way the special effects in that were done. I read somewhere they initially wanted to try to get ILM equipment that they used on Star Wars, but it was too dang expensive because they didn't want to put a huge amount of money in here. So everything was done with practical and old school camera angles. That's why it does look a little dated, with it. But still, I remember seeing the conversion room going, oh my God! I'm like, they're zapping people's heads.
But they also did some in-house techniques that they invented that were actually really new that kind of converted those old school things, like that I was reading about. That, for instance, they had something that would where a camera could move over matte paintings in the background and stuff, and it added an extra depth. And honestly, here's the thing: I remember seeing this on the big screen, and I fell asleep in Sleeping Beauty and then woke up in time to see them at the bridge in the beginning of the black hole. Like, oh, and I don't know. I think I was drifting out again. I was young at the time, but so most of the times I did see this as a kid was on like Disney Channel, VHS, all these cropped things. This, I think, was the first time since then that I'd seen it widescreen. I rented the high def from Vudu or something. And I was blown away by just how vast, how impressive this film looked. I said, my God, this really is ambitious, isn't it?
The money that they spent on the ship alone, because that was done in miniature.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
They actually built that ship, and it was. They spent so much money on this movie. Oh my God!
$20 million.
I think and by that time, by that standard, that's ridiculous at that day and age. Ridiculous.
20 million was huge. Star Wars was only 10.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's why they ultimately probably re-released it right away, because they had desperately needed to get their money back.
Yes.
I mean, but when it's all said and done, I think I looked at some numbers here. It made $35 million, and that's out of the $20 million budget for the film alone. That doesn't include the additional like $5 or $6 million they spent in marketing.
Yeah, it was like barely profitable. It did make money, but just barely.
Just barely, by the skin of its frickin' teeth.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and then I was reading some of the trivia on here too. I mean, it had computer graphics. It had at the time the longest opening computer graphics scene. And folks, this is back in an age when if you could do a vector graphic cone, which is what they do in this opening, you had a Cray supercomputer doing that in real time. I mean,
yeah. I just, and when I went to dating myself again, when I went to technical college this would have been 1990, 91, ended up using like 486 computer to do 3D animation, but I had time synced VHS, well, it was like 3/4 inch VHS tape, and so we could render a frame, record the frame on tape exactly, and it took us like 36 hours just to do a fly through a keyhole that we made, like the knob and the plate and all that, and that took 36 hours to move it in a section, record the, render it, and then record it onto tape, and then move it again, to do that whole thing. And it took a day and a half, a day and a half to do, where we did it in shifts.
Wow, man.
Yeah, and to roll this back now and go to 1979 and say that and this was just a wireframe sort of a cone that they went into. That must have taken weeks to do.
Yeah.
And you did use a Cray supercomputer that could do all these computations, which by now, I mean, I'm holding my Android up here, and the power of what this has far surpasses the computers that were available at that day and age.
Oh yeah.
To give anybody like a sense of sort of processing scale, as it were, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, they. Well, I was reading some of the other things in here too. Like you were mentioning, the model apparently was 12 feet long and 175 pounds.
Yeah, it was a no screwing around model that they built for that.
No, I mean, and for 79, I know there was the Star Wars, but it didn't have Lucas's name on it. But there's a visual effect or effects going on in every scene in this film. When they open, the crew of the Palomino are supposed to be in a weightless environment, so they're all on wires and stuff moving around the cockpit of their small ship, and they've got actually a hologram map. I mean, it's an ambitious project, especially for the time that it came out.
Just even slight things like there's a scene where they're in the elevator, and Vincent's right next to him. Now Vincent floats in the air, which of course now you have to understand. Well, wait. No matter what, even today, it's kind of would be bizarre, but you can do it with trick fire. Back then, no, there's no CGI, there's no nothing, and things didn't float, Yeah. And there's a scene, and as if to show you how sly they are, to say, oh well, it's on strings. He does a complete 360 in the air, just very casually, and it's seen as a no big deal. Yeah. And you gotta think, I was looking at that saying, how did they do that?
Or they've got him following the crew, and it's the practical Vincent robot traveling with the crew through the corridors, and they get on the transport seamlessly, and he sits up in front, and the people sit behind him, and then it takes off in one shot, and you're like, how?
It was amazing.
I mean,
and then, sorry.
That's fine.
And don't forget, there's the part that really blew me away. Because again, most of the prints I saw, because I was fading in and out when I was 5. Most of the prints I saw were these old VHS and Disney Channel prints and stuff. When they get onto the bridge of the Cygnus, and they see that star field behind them, and then you see these robed figures in silhouette and everything, it's astonishing. I mean, it's astonishing. This film has so much magic and really ambition and interesting things, all of which is just completely incredible until anybody speaks. Once they speak, then that goes out the window. And ideas and all that, really good.
Yeah, considered, I think, by most as the least scientifically accurate film ever in the history of film ever.
You saw the Neil deGrasse Tyson thing, didn't you?
No, okay, I hadn't.
Oh, you hadn't?
No.
Neil deGrasse... TMZ, or one of these people that just kind of follow around looking for famous people, one of these sites actually cornered Neil deGrasse Tyson and said, what is the most scientific... Because they knew he was nitpicking about everything. He nitpicked about the Starfield and Titanic. He nitpicked about gravity, because he's a super scientist, so of course that's the first thing he sees and stuff.
Right.
and they asked him, "What's the most scientifically inaccurate film you ever saw?" He just went off on the black hole.
Yeah.
He said, "Oh, it's terrible. Oh, the black hole." He says, "Not only is this scientifically inaccurate, but it would have been so much more interesting if they were scientifically inaccurate. Accurate. In 1979, I knew more about black holes than they did." And he went off and he talked about how, and I'm not a great scientist, so I'm just trying to paraphrase what he said. That if once you went to the eye of a black hole, they knew back then that your bodies would stretch.
Yeah.
Spaghettification.
Yeah.
And they called it spaghettification, exactly. And he said that would have been great. I'm thinking, like, this movie was horrifying enough, Neil. without seeing, Robert Forster go whoop into like a tiny, like, thin spindle. I just kept on reminding myself of this one time I had this. I'm just gonna really quickly say this. I'm sorry, you can cut this out later.
It's okay.
Is that when I was in college, and this was like during, and I think this is around 1996, 1997, so I was like midway through college at that point. I was taking a history class, historical evidence and analysis, and I had this wonderful professor's Middle Eastern guy. Can't remember his name. Egyptian professor. He's just fantastic. And I said, "Yeah, we just got." And he saw me get out of the car and go into cabin and says, "Hey, Scott, how are you doing? Where were you?" I says, I need to go see a movie. Do you know the movie?" I'm like, "Yeah, I just got back from the movies. I went to go see this movie with Nick Nolte called Mulholland Falls," which you'll remember about the hats. It was kind of like the same thing that Gangster Squad was basically last year. And I liked it. No one else did. I liked it. And he says, "Oh, I'm looking to go to the movie right now. Is it any good?" And he says, "Yeah, it's good." And I thought, "Oh, who am I talking to?" I thought, "You need to know, though. I'm going to tell you right now. It's not historically accurate at all." And he said, and this professor who like dealt in history and told us, how to research census records and look through all these things. That was the whole point: is research, research, research. He just said, "Oh, who gives a damn about that? I just want to see a movie, goddamn." I'm thinking, Neil, lighten up. I love you. I get where you're coming from. I totally get it, but let it pass.
What's funny about the black hole too is I always consider it Disney's kind of lost like classic sci-fi film, because I mean they finally did a proper restoration, the 25-year anniversary or something a while back. They did release it on Blu-ray finally, but it was really one that they marketed for a while when I was a kid, and then you really didn't hear about it or see anything about it. It wasn't in any of their really montages. After a while, Black Hole.
After a while, it was just sort of that like experiment
kind
they
of
did.
faded into history as that's that movie over there. But I did read that it was because of this movie that they started the Touchstone Pictures division of Disney, so they could make more adult material and not have the Disney name on it, because apparently.
Well, and they did, this horrified people. Then they did play around with it a bit, and then they did. I can't remember if maybe one of you can correct me if this is an actual production or if they just released it. But I mean, they did Watcher in the Woods shortly afterwards.
I think so, yeah.
Which was terrifying. Something Wicked This Way Comes.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, not as terrifying, but certainly more adult, Tron.
Oh yeah.
And I don't think they could have touched Tron with the effects and everything without tackling Black Hole first.
Right.
Honestly. I think you can kind of even see a nod to that in the sequel, Tron Legacy, where in one of the opening scenes, little Kevin Flynn, the kid, has a black hole poster on the wall, as if to say, we wouldn't be here without Tron, and Tron wouldn't be here without that.
Well, and the big ship in Tron too. If you look at the big long ship that the Master Control, if you look at the way it's kind of designed, it has hints of the black hole ship. I mean, from its side,
doesn't it? Yeah. Good point.
Really does have that Cygnus kind of look to it. That's what I thought when I first saw the ship in Tron, but yeah, it was because I think this movie really did open up going to Disney, going, we could do some more mature stuff, but I don't think we want to put the Disney name.
No, in fact, the second film that they released that was PG, they released just in early 1980, was a comedy, Midnight Madness, which some
Right.
people just love, and I absolutely hate, by the way. But they actually went out of their way. Now, when they market it, it says Disney right over it.
Well,
But
yeah.
back then, they made no mention of it being a Disney movie, and you had to look really closely in on the poster and in the credits to see copyright Buena Vista. Oh, that place. But if you didn't look at that, you would swear that it came from Crown International or one of these other places, but it was a Disney film. But I think they looked at that and they said, yeah, we can't put the Disney name on that, so.
Well, they've tried that a couple of times with their other stuff, and they found they can't. I think recently, wasn't it 4 or 5 years ago, Disney tried to do that again to where they were just going to have the Disney brand. That was until they found out they can't put the Disney name on Bad Santa. Disney Bad Santa just doesn't work.
Did they try to do that? With Bad Santa?
Because Bad Santa was, I believe, Touchstone or Miramax,
Miramax,
which when they owned, there were talks, and I remember there were examples of where they were going to put the Disney name on the title because go to one brand, and it didn't work out real quick.
There's a massive chasm between the Black Hole and Midnight Madness, and having Billy Bob Thornton doing anal sex with people in the mall. That's the Grand Canyon of the
Well, no, but I mean, it goes along with here, putting the Disney brand name on something that, Disney is more associated with very happy, friendly rainbows and not Anthony Perkins getting chopped up by a large robot.
Well, it's because, the Walt Disney name went Walt Disney the person. And I think, some people have said, I remember when in the 80s, when they started talking about stuff like this, that there's lots of people saying Walt Disney would be disgusted with this, and I don't think he would have. I think at least for some of the things like Black Hole, Something Wicked This Way Comes, Tron, those things that kind of kept that still now I don't know how he would have thought of Down and Out in Beverly Hills when they did the Touchstone, and then they started doing comedy, drama, stuff like that. But I think that he would have been totally cool with it, because he developed a wide array of emotions. They just didn't have these rating systems. They didn't have the codes, the MPAA codes back then. They had one code. And I remember in the 80s, Splash was about to come out, and this was before, and they finally chose that as the first Touchstone movie.
Mm-hmm.
That's the reason they did that is because there was a controversy for a while. They didn't know what Splash was going to get rated, and they said, Splash is going to be the first Walt Disney film rated R. That's what they were saying, because they knew that it had nudity and stuff in it, and that Tom Hanks was talking about banging Daryl Hannah, who's a fish. And it's like this isn't the Little Mermaid, they hadn't done the Little Mermaid yet, but it's not that kind of fairy tale. And I remember they did the Touchstone to get around that.
Mm-hmm.
To say, okay, it's not Disney, it's Touchstone. It's not TV, it's HBO. And and they did that because the Walt Disney name was so associated with this, and they were already getting flack for films like The Black Hole, like this, by saying oh, Disney would be disgusted. Now he would have been fine with it. On certainly these things that at least showed imagination. And then, later on, going into the 21st century, I think he would have been totally cool with the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, too.
Yeah, oh, definitely. Now, what do you think, though? I thought it was interesting, and I totally forgot about the whole, what I call 2001 ending to the Black Hole, where it gets existential and theological suddenly, almost felt out of nowhere, with the ending. I mean, you got the devil imagery, and you got the angel imagery, and suddenly they've got this planet that's glowing white. And I mean, you're getting hit in it. I mean, if someone doesn't pick up that they're going for heavens on the other side of the black hole,
Well,
depending on how you live.
I think it was really kind of a just desserts sort of a scenario, because you had, and I remember this distinctly, the Doctor and Maximilian were combined into one entity, and they're overseeing hell, where the rest of the good guys ended up flying out in what you kind of assume is heaven, and they're going to a planet, a paradise, a planet, and they went through safely to the other side. So, you know, kind of that, if just because you can doesn't mean you should, and if it doesn't turn out, here's your reward.
Right.
And I really kind of felt that's what happened.
He kind of went through went through this heavenly portal. You saw like an angel thing, and then they're going towards this planet on this other side of the universe. And you can think that either they passed through heaven and are now exploring some unexplored world, which is kind of like what I was thinking was going on.
Yeah, and actually, if you read the Gold Key comics, Gold Key got the rights to do the Black Hole comic book, and they actually were in another universe. So they kind of continue that story on because they got the licensing for it. It's very interesting.
So they kind of pass through our heaven and hell here in our universe to another universe, possibly.
Yeah, I really want to read. It really, I tell you this, but it was so vague that it really made me want to read the Alan Dean Foster novelization. I was like, huh. I wonder
you're a brave man.
What Al said.
But that imagery, like you mentioned, I forgot to mention, the combining of the Doctor and Maximilian into one was one creepy image. His just eyes looking through the visor, and then Maximilian, the Dr. Maximilian combo is hovering on this mountain, and you've got the people in fire and brimstone. I mean, that's a pretty freaking scary scene.
Yeah,
at the end of that
really is.
I actually found the ending. I find the ending. I mean, because I think that but it's done so quickly. Honestly, it's so quick. And it's just something, honestly, I think it had some interesting ideas there, but I always found the ending to this movie so underwhelming. Seriously. I'm thinking, like, what is on the other side of this black hole? And then you're just like, heaven, hell, the usual. Like, oh. Well,
almost like
worth it.
almost like they weren't quite sure how to end it. And
I
maybe
actually wondered that, because you see them, the last time you see them is they're in the ship. There's no dialogue.
Yeah.
No dialogue from them in the ship. You know, they repeat like looped dialogue from the earlier in the film, but you just see them in the ship. I'm wondering if this film wasn't in production at some point, because I've never read these early drafts of the script or anything like that, what they were working with. I think they're available online somewhere, I imagine. Yeah. But you just see them in the ship like this. I'm wondering, like, were they filming this and saying, by the way, directors, what happens next? They're like, we're figuring it out, you know? Don't worry. By December 1979, we'll come up with something. You know?
But it's definitely, I think it's definitely a what I call the lost Disney film, though, because, a lot of people don't realize that movie, one, is out there, and two, that it was Disney, and that it's actually this really creepy movie that I think people should watch. I mean, even to the bad guy getting crushed by the huge monitor at the end on screen. To the idea that he wasn't exactly in control, with Maximilian being the one in control, which I always wondered about that angle when I watched it again. I'm like sitting there going, are they alluding to the fact that maybe he's doing Maximilian's bidding and not necessarily his own?
No, The one thing that in watching it again, the thing that I kind of felt was that sometimes you make something, you pursue something, and you are no longer in control of it.
Mm-hmm.
It was like he wanted this thing so bad, he created and manipulated everything, made Maximilian and made all of his zombie minions, but in the end, it was sort of his vision, and at the moment that he doubted, all of his creations went, you're going ahead with it.
He got totally Frankenstein is what happened.
Yeah, and again, that's sort of going back to the morality thing, that morality play of, you wanted this, and here you go.
Right.
You get it now.
Mm-hmm.
Be careful what you wish for.
Be careful what you wish for. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up here. It is getting kind of late. I appreciate you guys doing this with me, sitting in and reliving these dark 80s kids movies. I think I'm really enjoying going back and revisiting these old films I haven't watched since pretty much I was a kid. And seeing new stuff and not realizing some of the messages and subtext and things that were in them that were supposedly marketed towards kids, and you pick up on all these layers underneath watching them now that I'm older. Any final thoughts on these films, or go ahead, Brad?
The one thing that I wanted to throw in there too is, what you're saying, watching Poltergeist when I was a child was a very scary movie, but then watching it after I became a parent, it became scary on a whole different level that was completely emotionally unobtainable to me because I had never had a child.
Right.
So going back and watching some of these things, you do see something new now that you have different life experiences. Some of the things that you might have glossed over as a child and went, okay, whatever, now have meaning. So to be able to go back and watch these things and revisit some of the movies of your childhood, not always a bad thing. Could be a conversation starter with your kids, or make you think about things, or maybe put you back in a situation where you kind of maybe re-access what it's like to be a kid again, and your job as a parent to try to help your child through it. So, not a bad idea to revisit some of these things.
Yeah. Scott, any final thoughts with this and visiting these darker 80s kids films?
Wow, well said. No, well said. I think that I think that revisiting them, you get a new perspective on things. I'm the only one of us three that does not. That's still like the single guy here. I probably will be forever. It's gonna be like me in the nursing home, like, ooh, maybe she's available. But
dude, from what I hear, that's not a bad place to be when you can clean up in the nursing home, dude.
That's what I'm thinking. That's
Bam.
What I'm thinking. See, that's my zone. That's my window. but yeah, I mean, no, you do. Well, I think that when we're kids, even though we have these perceptions of the world and these stories that we see, and I think that we think we grasp everything as a kid, but we really don't. We don't really follow the stories as closely, I think, as we think we do. And so a lot of these films that were released around the time, we're getting to rediscover now, which I think is really amazing. I mean, I'm imagining now that there's going to be somebody's going to do a podcast or whatever the equivalent is, like 15, 20 years from now, about watching WALL-E for the first time in 25 years.
Sure.
And catching on all the themes going on in WALL-E, and stuff like that. And
there's another good example, though, Scott, too, is as a child, you're like, oh, cool robots, they're in the future, and oh, look at those fat people. But the message that it tells is something completely different.
Completely different, completely much more mature, a lot of stuff going on there. And I'm discovering that about these films, and it's amazing, actually. I love it. It's one of the things that keeps me going back to film in general, and fantasy and science fiction in particular, are these mature themes being touched upon in these works. You know, it's really an impressive feat, and it's one of those things that it's the reason why these films, even the ones that didn't do so hot when they were released, people are still talking about them 30 years later, is because there's a lot to talk about there. You know, so I would recommend it to anybody. You know, and sometimes you're going to come across something where you say, "Ooh, this isn't quite what I expected. That's not as good as I remember." But then other times you're going to look and you're going to see a lot more. You know, so don't hit it and quit it on movies, guys. Keep coming back years later.
Go back to them, definitely.
Yeah.
And we may do another one of these because I hope our listeners don't mind them. These are just so much fun because, like you said, I see so much more now going back to them. There's another set of 3 that I may want to go back to. It's going to be
Legend in there.
We could do Legend, but no, I was going to do just it's sci-fi, not necessarily dark films, but 3 sci-fi kids films or family films that
I guarantee I was there at the opening day in the theater.
So people, you want to stay tuned in and look for it in the near future, guys. I'll let you know which 3. You probably can suspect which ones that stuck with me with I'm a Kid that weren't attached to Jorge Lucas. So why don't we wrap it up quick, Brad? Why don't you tell them where you can find your stuff at?
You can find my stuff at galacticnetcasts.com. Do 2 shows. One is the Alien Invasion, and the other is Sci-Fi Geeks Club. And I also do a blog. I've been bad. I haven't written a post in a week and a half. But that's spectrum-force5.tumblr.com. Think about it for a second. Yeah, those are the main things that you can find me at. And working on finishing up the studio this weekend, so the audio quality on my end is probably going to go up quite a bit in the next couple of weeks.
I got to get to that level yet. I'm working on it slowly, but definitely.
It's an investment. We're building a table this weekend, and we dropped like $130 on lumber to build the tables. So it's a labor of love.
Nice table, though.
It's going to be a hell of a table. It
Scott,
better be.
What about you? It better be for that price.
I have a web series called Movieocrity. That's MOVIOCRITY. That's on Vimeo, vimeo.com/channels/Movieocrity. And that's all about exploitation cinema and slightly kind of railing against the sameness and mediocrity in more mainstream fare. A new episode just premiered. So I'm doing more Movieocrity. It's also on YouTube. I like Vimeo better because YouTube sometimes cuts my episodes and everything, and they suck. But I have it on both YouTube and Vimeo, whichever you prefer. Vimeo's better. I also have started a podcast of single movie reviews and daily life musings, kind of called Cinema Obsession, which I'm not going to spell for you, but you can look that up on Podomatic. Cinema Obsession. Just combine the words together and figure it out. And so that's there. And Brad, you think you've been bad. I have a website called Film Geek Central that I have not, filmgeekcentral.com, have not written anything for in a couple months, although other people have. And I think I'm going to be writing some stuff for it soon or figure something else out. But, you can still read my stuff there at filmgeekcentral.com as well.
Awesome. Great, guys. And, yeah, my stuff... Well, you can find the podcast here, video version, links to the video version, plus the audio versions of these podcasts on specialmarkproductions.com/the spoiler room. We are on iTunes as well as Stitcher. So we are on both those now venues. And we are also on a number of websites, thanks to Brad through Midwest Communications. So we are branching out slowly but surely. You can hear our audio versions of our show there. Otherwise, you can catch my reviews on my channel on YouTube, Special Mark, youtube.com/specialmark, or on welivefilm.com, where I'm doing reviews there as well. So I'm kind of all over the place. We have the Film Jerks podcast, Astro Radio Z podcast. All those links you can find at specialmarkproductions.com. If you go there, there's a friends section where you can find links to all stuff, to Brad's, to I think I got Scott's up there. If not, it will be up there soon. I got to update the web page. So I think I got to put your links up there yet, Scott, but definitely have to update the web page. I'm just as bad.
I'll have to see your website then.
I'm just I'm just as bad. You guys with your blog, with my webpage, I haven't updated. So, but I thank you for going on this journey. We hopefully will do another spoiler room in a couple of weeks. I want to do a more regular. I'd like to do a little more regular every other week or so. I know everybody's busy with their various projects, so and definitely gonna do another three pack of films. I think sci-fi this time, of kids sci-fi films that are favorites of mine. That's because it's my show, damn it. And I'll pick ones I want. Right. I want to pick ones that I want to talk about, dang it. So I want to thank everybody for watching and listening, all the listeners too that listen to us, subscribe to us on iTunes. Please tell your friends, have your friends tell their friends, and visit all this stuff from Scott's stuff and Brad's stuff. All great listening stuff that gets you through your day for sure. And remember, with the spoiler room, folks, the movies are definitely spoiled, but the conversation is definitely fresh. Have a good night, all.